Hey friends, welcome back to my Leadership Behavior podcast, where we break down big leadership ideas and connect them to real world events shaping our world today. I'm your host, as always, Edbetter Baby, and today's episode we're going to be diving into something really exciting: how nations develop and thrive using principles of adaptive leadership. And this is with a special focus. Our lens is going to be on President Trump's recent speech at the Saudi-US Investment Forum in Riyadh. Now, regardless of where you stand politically, that speech held some very fascinating leadership insights, especially when seen through the framework of adaptive leadership. So today we're going to be in this episode, we're going to be packing 6 principles from the speech that speaks to the idea that real sustainable progress doesn't come from outside imposition, it comes from within. I'd like you to take a listen to an excerpt from the speech, and then I'll be back.
And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly. And it's something only you could do. You achieved a modern miracle, the Arabian way. That's a good way.
Hey, welcome back. What an excerpt. What a speech. Now, the first leadership principle that we'll like to consider from the speech is leaders need to honor local knowledge and context. President Trump in his speech referenced that progress in the Middle East didn't come from outside lectures or imported systems. It was led by local people. The work of leadership requires that leaders must get on the balcony and gain perspective. Now, this means recognizing the unique dynamics, the values, and the histories within a system. Nation builders failed because they assumed that what worked elsewhere would work universally. But they need to get on the balcony, and that doesn't mean staying distant. It means stepping back just long enough to see what's already working at the ground level. In every society, people carry the seeds of their own solutions. Honor those seeds, and transformation grows from within. True transformation happens when leaders understand and work within the existing cultural framework rather than imposing an outsider's lens. Now, it calls for leaders and institutions to pause their assumptions and ask, what's already working here that we've overlooked? What wisdom exists in this culture that doesn't need to be replaced, but only supported? What often goes wrong is that many international interventions, from military to operations to humanitarian aid and economic reform programs, suffer from a common flaw. They assume outside expertise is superior to local experience. Foreign agencies bring in standardized blueprints, technologies, and consultants, but overlook context. In doing so, they inadvertently disempower local actors, suppress organic innovation, and sometimes even undermine resilience. The result is what President Trump was pointing to in his speech. so-called nation builders who didn't understand the societies they were intervening in and ended up doing more harm than good. Now, questions are now being asked in several places in Africa, including in my home country, Nigeria. Is the Western model of liberal democracy actually serving our people? Or are we trying to drive a foreign vehicle on roads that were never designed for it? Looking at our new unique setting and context in Nigeria, it's important to look at what kind of authority and power structure should we maintain to promote balance and inclusion. I will speak more to this in a subsequent episode. You want to watch out for my episode as Nigeria prepares to celebrate democracy on June the 12th. I've got a special episode. You can't afford to miss it. It must be noted that national development must start with deep respect for local identity, wisdom, and lived experience. Nations don't thrive because they borrow systems. They thrive when they transform from within. And transformation doesn't always look flashy. It may come through oral traditions, faith-based conflict resolution, farming techniques adapted over generations, or architecture that reflects local climate and community interaction. And adaptive leadership teaches us that development is not a transplant, it's a cultivation. The leader's role is not to instruct people on how to change, but to help them see what's already possible with what they have. And the second principle I'm going to talk about, from the speech, is that leaders need to learn to identify the adaptive challenge. Most of the challenges we deal with in our societies and nations have an adaptive component, which must be identified through effective diagnosis. Now, technical fixes, which we have identified on this podcast as top-down solutions from authority figures, whether they are experts from within or outside the country, will not suffice. Now, President Trump rightly noted that Western strategies applied surface-level fixes to deep-rooted issues they didn't truly understand. Technical problems have known solutions. Adaptive challenges, on the other hand, require people to change their values, their roles, their behaviors. In Afghanistan and Iraq, for example, Western actors tried to apply technical solutions, conduct elections, parliaments, constitutions, without addressing tribal loyalties, legitimacy crisis, or the non-Western roots of governance. Now, these solutions were superficial when the heart of the issue was psychological, spiritual, and social. These deeper issues couldn't be solved by tools. They needed long-term internal evolution. Now, what was the result? Expensive failures. Government built on paper, not on trust. Roads and schools that could be destroyed faster than they were built. Institutions that lacked legitimacy in the eyes of their people. Now, this isn't just a critique of policy failure in places like Afghanistan or Iraq. It's a cautionary tale for Africa and other developing regions still wrestling with the consequences of imported development models. In contrast, countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are undertaking transformations that, while ambitious and controversial, have adapted to internal dynamics rather than overreaching them. In Saudi, for example, they have a Vision 2030 in the kingdom. And what are they doing? Reforming the economy away from oil, empowering women, yet doing so within a gradual, culturally informed framework, expanding entertainment and tourism in ways that respect religious sensitivities. Rather than impose Western liberalism, Saudi is reinterpreting tradition to fit modern demands, an adaptive approach. Look at the UAE. Dubai and Abu Dhabi didn't just copy Western capitalism. They customized regulatory and financial systems suited to the Gulf context. They kept tight social control while enabling global investment. They blended tribal leadership, legitimacy with modern infrastructure and technology. They did not reject their heritage. They built upon it strategically. Their success lies in the ability to distinguish between what must change and what must remain. Too often in Africa, Western donors and local elites alike have fallen into the trap of solving adaptive challenges with technical fixes, building schools without addressing cultural beliefs about girl-child education, holding elections without fostering civic trust or party maturity, creating anti-corruption agencies without disrupting patronage networks that feed political survival. And the result is a classic case of work avoidance, doing what's visible and comfortable rather than engaging in what is necessary and sometimes hard and difficult. African nations must go beyond infrastructure and elections and confront the following: ethnic fragmentation versus national identity, traditional authority versus formal governance, colonial borders versus indigenous territorial realities, elite capture versus public participation. Now, this is hard work. It will have to disrupt comfort zones, demand that leaders challenge their own constituencies, and rethink legitimacy from the ground up. But it is the only way transformation becomes sustainable. And the third principle I want to bring out from the speech is that leaders must learn to embrace heritage while innovating. You need to anchor leadership in values. Adaptive leadership is about mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and thrive, not by forgetting who they are, but by reconnecting with what's most enduring and valuable within them. President Trump stated it in his speech. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but from embracing your national traditions and embracing that heritage that you love. Adaptive change doesn't mean erasing the past. It means reinterpreting and reapplying core values in a modern context. Leaders must connect change to the identity of those they serve. That's how you avoid resistance and root transformation in something emotionally meaningful. Now think of modernization that honors religion, cultural pride, or historical resilience. A case in point is Rwanda's post-genocide renewal challenge. Now, after the 1994 genocide, Rwanda faced a monumental crisis of justice, identity, and national unity. Western models proposed tribunals and international courts, but these solutions were slow, foreign, and disconnected from the people. Now, what was the adaptive response? Rwanda revived the Gacaca courts, a traditional community justice system rooted in local customs. Now, these courts encouraged public confession and reconciliation, emphasized restorative justice over punitive punishment, involved ordinary citizens, not just elite legal professionals, allowed over 1.2 million cases to be held in a culturally resonant way. The Gacaca model modernized justice by anchoring it in deep Rwandan values of community, confession, and forgiveness. It wasn't a rejection of global norms. It was an adaptive fusion of tradition and necessity. Rwanda didn't develop by abandoning its heritage, but by reactivating and reframing it in response to new national needs. Too often, modernization is framed as westernization, as if tradition must be sacrificed to enter the global economy. But adaptive leadership insists otherwise. True transformation occurs not by erasing heritage, but by elevating it into relevance. In Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, and across Africa, leaders face the tension of modern demands versus traditional roots. The lesson for Rwanda and some places in the Middle East is clear. Don't silence tradition, reinterpret it. Don't copy others' blueprint, customize your own. Don't fear identity, lead with it. Now, key takeaways to note is that change that disconnects people from their story leads to resistance. Change that honors and evolves that story builds momentum. And the strongest change is value-based, not value-free. It moves forward not by turning away from the past, but by standing on it. The fourth principle to bring out from the speech is that we need to encourage sovereignty and unique vision. Every nation must chart its own course. External blueprints fail. Too often, African leaders have been pressured to adopt external models, economic systems, governance structures, development blueprints designed in Washington, Brussels, or Beijing, or whatever place. Yet these models often ignore the continent's social fabric, ethnic diversity, traditional authority, and spiritual worldview. Adaptive leadership urges leaders to resist the temptation to copy-paste solutions and instead mobilize their people to confront their own problems using their own language, culture, and history as tools. Now, key points that African leaders must note. Stop outsourcing your imagination. Start listening to your people. Innovation grows from within, not from imitation. Also, key adaptive leadership insights that African leaders need to know. It's number one, reclaim narrative sovereignty. Africa's greatest poverty is not natural resources. It is narrative dependency. Leaders must stop looking to international donors or development consultants for the future. Instead, curate national conversations about where the country wants to go, using local proverbs, history, spiritual beliefs, and traditional wisdom to shape that vision. Now, this is called giving the work back to the people. Example, Ghana's renewed embrace of Year of Return tourism is a cultural and economic innovation built around African heritage, not external models. Also, leaders need to encourage experimental leadership from below. Don't just listen to bureaucrats and foreign investors. Empower youth, local chiefs, informal community leaders, and women's groups to propose solutions. They understand the challenges like urban unemployment, land disputes, or religious conflict more intimately than technocrats. Adaptive leaders protect the marginal voices, those trying new things or saying uncomfortable truths. Example, in Nigeria, many local tech hubs and fintech entrepreneurs, such as Flutterwave, Paystack, emerge without government orchestration. Rather than regulating them out of existence, government should learn from them. Also, leaders need to customize democracy to fit cultural foundations. The Western liberal model of democracy, while noble in intent, often ignores Africa's traditional consensus-based, elder-led, and communal governance models. African leaders must explore hybrid systems that honor both the spirit of participation and the cultural norms of leadership. Adaptive leadership invites us to ask what's worth preserving as we modernize. So, dear African leaders, please note, your people are not empty vessels. Your traditions are not barriers, they are springboards. Your future cannot be outsourced. True leadership is not found in doing the work for your people, but in creating the conditions where they can do the adaptive work for themselves. True leadership is not about building dependency, but building capacity. And the fifth point I want to draw from President Trump's speech is leaders must avoid pretending to have all the answers. You have to maintain disciplined action. President Trump stated that foreign leaders gave advice they didn't understand or apply themselves. Leaders don't jump to easy answers. They help people stay with the hard questions long enough to learn and to grow. The failure of Western intervention lies partly in its arrogance, assuming it had the solutions without grappling with complexity. Leadership, especially in uncertain environment, means staying present with ambiguity and resisting the temptation to offer instant fixes. It must be noted that the best leaders are learners first, not know-it-alls. A classic case in point is Mandela's leadership action in post-apartheid South Africa. In 1994, Nelson Mandela emerged as the president of a newly democratic South Africa after decades of apartheid. The political transition was historic, but liberation also carried economic expectations, particularly among Black South Africans who had been systematically excluded from wealth, education, and opportunity. Many in Madiba's party, the African National Congress ANC, had long envisioned a socialist economic revolution, nationalizing mines, land, and banks to redistribute wealth. At the same time, international investors, white-owned businesses, and the middle class feared that economic radicalism would lead to capital flight, inflation, and collapse. The pressure was on. Revolutionary groups demanded justice now. International markets wanted stability now. The people wanted transformation now. Most leaders would have been tempted to impose a sweeping solution, either full-blown economic redistribution or an unquestioning embrace of neoliberal capitalism. But Mandela chose a third, slower, more courageous path. He stayed with the tension. Rather than relieve the pressure by choosing a simplistic ideology, Madiba held the space open for competitive values to be expressed, justice and stability, redress and growth, idealism and realism. He hosted multi-sectoral economic dialogues involving the ANC, business leaders, economists, and international advisors. Now, these conversations were slow, uncomfortable, and full of contradiction, but they helped the country avoid collapse. He resisted the heroic leadership, the heroic leader. Mandela didn't pretend to have all the answers. In fact, he delegated much of the economic decision-making to a competent team of technocrats, including the then Finance Minister Trevor Manuel and the Reserve Bank Governor Tito Mboweni. He trusted the process and built a coalition of competence. He disappointed many in the ANC by not nationalizing industries. He explained that economic stability was a precondition for long-term justice, not a betrayal of it. That took political courage. He created a culture of dialogue, not dogma. Mandela institutionalized consultation through parliament, labor reforms, and public dialogue. He normalized the idea that real leadership involves asking the hard questions publicly, not pretending they are solved in private. Mandela showed us that great leadership isn't in commanding change. It's in cultivating the environment where change becomes sustainable. He knew that disciplined attention to difficult conversations would yield more lasting freedom than any decree or speech could ever do. The quote by Mandela, "I am not a saint unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying." And that trying with humility, patience, and discipline is the very heart of adaptive leadership. Finally, the sixth point that I'll give you from the speech is that encourage adaptive capacity, build adaptive capacity. President Trump stated that countries like Saudi Arabia are showing how to evolve without losing identity. Adaptive capacity is the ability of a system or a nation or organization to learn, to evolve, and self-correct. Leaders should invest not just in solving today's problems, but in building the ability of people and institutions to solve future ones. This means education, open dialogue, experimentation, and learning from failure. It's not about immediate solutions. It's about building institutions that learn, citizens who think critically, cultures that tolerate experimentation and failure, systems that can adapt without unraveling. Now check out MBS and Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman didn't just launch reforms. He initiated deep structural transformation of the Saudi state, the economy, the culture, all whilst maintaining national identity, Islamic values, and centralized leadership. They focused on building adaptive capacity through one, institutional reform, not just programmatic tweaks. MBS restructured governments, ministries, and created delivery units like the Center for Performance Management, ADA, and the National Development Fund. Why? Because adaptive leadership requires updating the architecture of decision-making, not just issuing new policies. The result, these bodies didn't just implement, they evaluated, course-corrected, measured outcomes, encouraged continuous learning across government. They invested in human capital and education reform. Saudi Arabia invested massively in education reform, women's participation, vocational training through initiatives like the Human Capital Development Program. You are not building a workforce, you are building thinkers. And the real outcome was over 30% of STEM graduates are now women. Universities are being retooled to emphasize problem solving and entrepreneurship. You were creating safe zones for experimentation. Projects like NEOM and Kudia are not just economic ventures, they are living labs for testing new models of city governance, sustainability, and culture in a deeply conservative society. So adaptive leaders create containers for experimentation, spaces where new rules can be tried without destabilizing the whole. Now, these mega projects test ideas at scale, allowing failure and learning without threatening national coherence, softening social norms through dialogue instead of forcing Western liberalism. MBS allowed cinemas to return after 35 years, promoted concerts, tourism, sports, gave women more public freedom, but gradually, all this was done without outlawing Islamic tradition. Adaptive change sticks only when it is rooted in shared values. MBS created space for cultural evolution that felt authentic to the Saudis. Thank you so much for watching. I'd like you to subscribe to the channel, like, and also share with someone and pass it on. If this has been helpful to you, share with me. Let me have your thoughts. Go to the YouTube channel and then leave your comments there, and I will certainly get back to you. Until I come back to you again, keep leading and let your leadership practice keep going on to the next level. Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye-bye.